Good day. This is Kat for Cats About Town for TVC 22, Clarence Rockland. Today we're going to be talking to two of our residents, Rob and Hilary Merritt, but we're not in Clarence Rockland, we're in Cumberland because that's where Rob has his church, because Rob and Hilary are a couple of ministers. They are a couple of ministers, they are a couple. And this makes it a very interesting story. In this day and age when so many rules are being questioned and so many traditions are being questioned and so many ways of doing things are being questioned, but most of all when people are looking for a way to be and to worship and to live their lives fully, we find that there's more than one way. And we're so much more aware of it these days with all the talk about Muslims and Christians and Jews and the different communities. And people are asking so many questions, and people want to know really what it's all about and what works and what doesn't. At the end of the day, it all comes down to human beings giving of themselves, giving of their hearts, and giving in their own faith, which usually means one sense of love. But to tell you more about it, people who know far more about it than I do, because they have been living it for far more years than I even know, here I'd like to introduce Hilary.
Hello.
And Rob.
Hello.
Merritt. So, you are a couple, you are married, you have 4 children, and you are people who guide a congregation. So tell us how this came to be. Did you meet as ministers? Did you come together in a church? How did this happen?
We met when I was a student studying at Emmanuel College in Toronto, part of U of T. I was studying for ordained ministry, and I was working part-time in a church as a youth worker in Oakville, and Robert was part of that congregation. So,
So she came in my congregation and was hired as a youth worker. I, at that time, was working in business communications, so I wasn't in ministry at all. Okay. I was sitting in the pews.
All right. So it would be fair to say that in a sense, in the nicest sense of the term, you radicalized Rob. Yes. See?
I never thought about
it's
that.
It's all in the interpretation. So then you came together and you decided that you were going to give of yourselves.
Well, I was ordained in 1982 and settled in the United Church. At that time, you were sent somewhere. So I was sent to just north of Madoc, north of Belleville, to two churches there, congregations that I served for 3 years. And it was while I was there that Robert decided to explore a call to ministry.
I wasn't ordained until 1988. So she's the pro. I'm the rookie.
Even though he's older.
Yeah, wow. Senior ministry.
All right, keep it for home. But you did it together. You not only did it, you not only became ministers, or you were a minister, you became a minister, but you also, through all of this, since 1988, let's do a quick math here, we're talking about 27, 30 years, yep. You managed to bring up a family of 4 children, and you've been to quite a few congregations, so you've brought together quite a few people. How did you manage to balance it all out?
We were married in 86 and had 4 children very quickly. Mm-hmm. So the oldest was still 4 when the youngest was born. So, so the children were part of our lives when, throughout, Rob still was studying, and then once he was ordained. And so we decided once Rob was ordained to job share. So when the children were young, we job shared, so half-time each, officially, and we shared in the parenting, those responsibilities, and in serving the congregations. At that time, we were at Elginburg in Odessa, just outside Kingston, mm-hmm. and we were there 9 years. And so they saw the kids grow up from being born to, well, Sarah was only 3 when we moved, but we were there throughout their births and also there for our marriage. So they really celebrated with us.
So we're fortunate. Beautiful. Most couples don't have that option. Hilary would stay home in the morning, I'd go to the work in the afternoon. When I got tired of work, we'd switch around, so I'd be at home and Hilary would go to work. So our jobs were intertwined, as is our home life and marriage. And it's wonderful for a couple. Not every couple should do it. Wouldn't recommend every husband and wife to work together, but for Hillary and I, it's been a truly a great blessing. And we feed off each other when it comes to our ministry and support one another in our ministries together. And it's been good.
So I don't know much about the United Church. I imagine the ritual is the same, that you deliver a homily every week?
Yeah, there's well, first of all, people that come to worship in any congregation looking for a relationship with their Lord. So we begin with a welcoming and praise of the Lord that always begins with a confession and assurance of pardon to make someone right with their own personal relationships and their relationship with the Lord. In this church, we've managed to bring a lot of YouTube presentations to the congregation, so it's not just based on the old school sermon for 20 minutes. Here it's a lively congregation. Our children are very lively. We have a children's time at the start of the service. Kids are engaged. They love their musical instruments, a lot of singing. We use YouTube and presentations, both secular and sacred in its presentation, always looking to find the meaning of the YouTube in a spiritual sense, what it means to us. Even a secular song that might be popular on the radio can make people sit back and wonder, how does that feed into their faith? So we developed that. Hillary works very hard with the Christian education program of this congregation. Although Hillary has her own separate ministry, it's the first time in all our ministry together we teamed coming to Ottawa. Hillary is a minister on her own in her own youth and young adult ministry, while I'm the pastor here. But Hillary does work as a volunteer with me on Sundays.
We had been 9 years in Odessa and Elginburg. Then we went to Cambridge to First United. Again, job sharing half-time each, although that grew to time and a half between the two of us. And so we shared all the responsibilities. In a service, it wasn't uncommon, especially when the children were small and they needed nursing or, that I would be at the front for part of the service and Rob would be looking after the children, and then we'd switch places.
Presentation of the baby time.
And then as the kids were a little bit older, people in the congregation would often watch them so we could both be at the front. So sometimes instead of a regular sermon, we'd do a dialogue or, something to add interest to what we did. I remember one Christmas as we were at the front for the Christmas Eve service, Matthew was probably about 3, and he ran to the front. We had a little doll baby Jesus in the manger, and grabbed Jesus out of the manger and ran out into the church hall with kidnapping baby Jesus. So interesting things happen when you have both your parents at the front and the children being watched.
And of course, everybody was laughing.
Oh,
And
yes, it was fun.
It was like a big family. Everybody
Yes.
came together,
Yep.
and it's much easier to identify with a family like that.
And
So
we've
we-
always been able to include our children as they're growing up in our work. Our work is a lifestyle, obviously, but the children are involved in Sunday school through the youth groups and doing mission trips and being involved in the liturgy of the services, being involved in 30-hour famines, and teenagers that spend time to go without food and raise money for good causes, and they did their share in those kinds of mission projects too.
So our congregations have always been an extended family to our children, which is, I think, how congregations should be for everyone. And I think people that don't have that don't know what they're missing, to have that extended, loving, caring community that's always there to help out and to share in the happy times, times of celebration, and the challenges in life.
Well, it is often where you find how much more you're capable of doing than you realize when you have a large group like that. And as you said, you feed off each other, but I think the congregation also feeds off itself. And you come together and the burden is lightened.
Yes.
Well, in fellowship, that's exactly
is
what
multiplied.
happens. People care for one another, and so when you do care for one another, the burden is lifted, and much can be achieved when you come together in fellowship, and especially around causes for the community, and you find there's a heart for both supporting programs, mission programs, and also supporting one another in times of bereavement.
So we were in Cambridge for 17 years. So that congregation saw our children grow up from quite young all the way up to being young adults. And we were teaming that whole time. And then 4.5 years ago, I accepted a call to come to Ottawa. In the United Church, areas of congregations go together to form presbyteries. So this presbytery has about 60 congregations. So my ministry is to coordinate youth and young adult ministry for the 60 congregations. So there's a lot of programming and a lot of support and consulting. It's a very interesting and varied job. But for us, it's been the first time since Rob was ordained that we've not been sharing in the same ministry. But that being said, ministers who aren't in a regular church setting are expected to have to be voluntary associate ministers with a congregation. So of course mine is Robert's. And my focus as a voluntary associate with Robert's Church has been the children's ministry here. So the Sunday school and the children's choir. So that gives us a chance, an opportunity to team. And I do sometimes preach, not very often here, or sometimes team on worship
dialogues,
services. Yeah.
So it sounds like your lives are completely caught up in this. I gather that you get calls in the middle of the night,
course.
in the middle of the day, any time
you're
of
on
day,
call.
all the time. And either you're organizing something, and when you're going off on your trips, you belong to the group. You have no private time. So I can't remember
Those
who.
are blessings.
Yes, it was Pope Francis who said, we are too jealous of our off time. Or it wasn't those exact terms, but he was essentially talking about this when he was recently in the United States, about how people just so much want their time to themselves.
Yeah.
You have very little of that.
Well,
But you don't seem to be suffering for it, really.
we've always been able to see worship and work as one, and that really is it's what drives us in ministry. I don't think we'd be in ministry if we didn't believe that worship and work was the same. So for ourselves, the balance of a good, happy marriage and fun with the children and times for ourselves separate from the kids have always been part of who we are. It also is encouraging to be in a congregation that is loving and supportive, that you want to be with them. So this congregation is going to take, 18 of us are going to Dominican to build a house in January, 10 from this congregation, 8 from the community. We want to be with those 18 people. That's not work, it's fun, it's being together, it's joy of knowing others and sharing with them. It's beyond the ministry that you could spend your time doing something other, but what a wonderful opportunity to spend time with friends of the congregation and do something meaningful. So
I think you're growing up to be Jimmy Carter, right?
and Jimmy Carter's my hero.
It is. He is.
Really? I didn't even know
No,
that.
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and that's, and talking about Carter, our ministry has always been one both of bringing people closer to God and reconciling ourselves with others in Sunday worship, but is also a large part of being socially active. And Carter's work with Habitat for Humanity has always been something that's been important to us. Housing's been important to us. We've been involved in a number of housing projects, including Habitat. And there's an example of good leadership that goes in the community and gathers with community members to do good work for others. And we're both driven by that. Hillary has spent a good part of her ministry doing mission trips.
Hillary, your trips, I've known you now for perhaps 3 years, and you always seem to be organizing a trip, on a trip, recovering from a trip, preparing for the next trip. And it's always youth, or mostly youth, I think.
It's mostly been youth
And
of
that is
late.
obviously what
That's
you
my
connect
portfolio.
with. Yes, you're a mother to everyone.
My portfolio is youth and young adult minister for the Ottawa Presbytery.
Wait a minute, sorry, youth and young adult ministers? So you're preparing them all to be ministers?
No, I'm the youth and young adult minister.
You are.
And my ministry is then with the youth and young adults in the Ottawa
Not
area.
radicalizing everybody.
And so I find that a large part of what makes their faith meaningful to young people is to be able to put their faith into action. And a large part of what makes it possible for people to understand each other and to be able to relate to each other is to become friends with each other. So a lot of the partnerships visits I've done have been with First Nations communities across Canada, taking young people on exchanges. And all of a sudden, the other young people from a First Nations community in another part of Canada, instead of being those people there, that's my friend. Mm-hmm. And so when people are stereotyping young people from reservations, you can't do that anymore when they're your friend. All of a sudden you realize, no, that's not true. Mm-hmm. That's just a stereotype, and stereotypes are rarely true. And so I think it's important to foster this type of communication and experiencing each other's culture. So that's a large part of why I do it. And then some of the partnership visits I've done, for example, I took a group of young adults to Zambia 2 years ago.
Zambia.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not just taking them to the easy places. You're
I took a group of young adults to Chipembe, the United Church of Zambia mission in Chipembe, and they partnered with the young people there, the school and the church and the agricultural college and the health clinic there, mm-hmm. to do some work and to learn about each other's culture. And again, it makes a huge difference to their lives and my life to understand these people as people, not as statistics in a book or in a news article or something.
All right. Now, I was recently talking to some veterans, and one of the things that was mentioned in one of the interviews so struck home and has been so disturbing to me, and that was when some of our military are overseas and they see, of course, some of our Canadian military overseas, they see these civilians, these children and these women in the villages, and they see their need and they see their desperation and their fear, and they can't do anything for them. So I know you don't have those restrictions, but neither can you possibly do all that you would want to for all of them. You must have a lot of tears too.
Well, yes, of course. Yeah. It's hard you can't walk away and leave work at work, right? No. But I have to trust that the little drops that I can do can add up to in the body of what everybody can do. And that God can take the little bits that we do and being faithful in our lives to do the best we can do, and from those little bits, God can do amazing things. So true. Hopefully I can help God to facilitate God's touching the lives of some young people who maybe will go on to do great things, or maybe just small things that will all add up to the great things that God can do.
Absolutely. You never know what's going to make the difference and whose life you're going to touch. So you do these groups once, twice a year?
Usually once a year or once every couple of years. It depends what opportunities come. Mm-hmm. The federal government has a program, Experiences Canada, it's just changed its name, that facilitates exchanges of young people across Canada. So I've been able to tap into that. And then I've done some...
Oh, so you do paperwork too?
Yes, lots.
Oh, more so than I.
Yeah, so yes, lots of it. So some has been with the help of government, other has been all our own fundraising. So there's different ways to facilitate this sort of thing happening. But it's exciting. It's an interesting ministry to have.
It's exciting. She says it's exciting. This church, it's a beautiful, quaint little church. It's old. It doesn't seat too many, and you have one service a week.
Yes, we have.
If I'm correct.
Yeah, our Sunday worship is Sunday mornings, 10:15. This congregation is 187 years old. So we've been in the community for a long time. This is the third building. The first building was down almost by the Cumberland Ferries, and it burnt. And then the second church was built, it burnt. Those are the days of fires in the 1800s.
Yeah.
And then this was established at this corner. We've been here for a long time. Our roots are Scottish Presbyterian, and so this congregation would have been settled by Scots and Irish in the area back in the 1800s. We're older than Canada, so we...
You mean the United Church or this parish?
This parish is older than Canada. This parish was established 187 years ago. Canada's not even 150 yet. So this congregation has been faithful to this community for many, many years. The United Church came into being in 1925, so this congregation was around before Union, before United Church. It was a Presbyterian church until 1925. So this would have been known by old-timers as being St. Andrew's Presbyterian until 25, and by Act of Parliament, the United Church of Canada was established, and this congregation became a United Church at that point.
All right. Now, perhaps over those years, you've accumulated a lot of spirits that are watching over you and helping you, and in fact, I would believe it. I do believe it. But still, you can't seat all that many people in here, so perhaps what I was getting at was your congregation's not very big to fund all of these projects.
This congregation will seat 200. Our congregation is a healthy congregation in terms of community support. There are people that belong to this congregation through generations. Their parents and grandparents have been here. So there's deep, deep roots. The congregation on any Sunday morning in most Protestant churches are in the decline as Sunday has become a day of anything but rest or anything but the Lord's Day. So their habitual worship that congregations once saw everybody get up in the morning and go to church, probably two times a day, has changed, and that really has been a factor of consumerism. Consumerism rules the day. But this congregation is a healthy, strong congregation, and there's a great love for its ministry. So yes, we do support others as we're called to be a church of support, and we're able to support ministry here.
I think a change has been that a lot of people, not just with this congregation, but with all mainline denominations, there's a lot of people claim affiliation to a congregation, to a congregational family, but they can't make church every Sunday. It's not, so they still are very active within the congregation, but we don't know that we're going to see them every Sunday. You have the reality of a lot of split families where children are with one parent or another parent, alternating weekends, and that makes a difference. And then, of course, we're competing with sports and other things. Mm-hmm. But this congregation still has a good number of young families that are reasonably active. Maybe we won't see them every Sunday, but we see them on a fairly regular basis. And so we've seen a growth in young families since coming here. And so it is an active, healthy congregation. The other thing, financially, is where people see their priorities. And this is a faithful congregation who sees their congregation as an avenue for being able to do good works in Christ's name.
And I think very often when it's a matter of timing, so that you've established yourselves, you've shown what you're doing, you've proven what you stand for as a family, as ministers, and so you're trustworthy. And when people are in need of what the congregation offers or what your guidance offers, then they know that they can come here, and then you wait patiently until the time is right.
Well, it's everybody will find their need when the time comes, and it can come very early in life and come very late in life. The door is always open.
Well, that's the beautiful story of the prodigal son. God, the Father, waits patiently. On another note, Rob, you are also the chaplain for the Air Cadets?
Yeah, I do double duty in Rockland. I'm chaplain for the Air Cadets, 832 Squadron. about 80 youth on the floor, so it's a good representation in a city of 10,000. So the cadets have a very strong mandate in Rockland and often seen in many public events. They're very strong support Canada Day and Remembrance Day and all the parades that happen. I'm also the Padre to the Legion, 554 Legion in Rockland. So it's a good tie between the senior veterans and the youth of the day. So I am that kind of liaison between both organizations, and I'm happy to fulfill my spiritual role and guidance in both ends of military, so to speak.
Well, I did actually do a show on the Air Cadets, and I spent a lot of time watching them, preparing that show, and I must say I was tremendously impressed with the commitment not only of the what do you call them? Not the instructors, but
The commanding officers.
the commanding officers, but also of the children. The beautiful blend of playfulness and seriousness.
And I think Air Cadet program brings towards leadership training, and that's the whole goal of it. Is as you go through the rank, you take on more responsibility. The important part for me as a chaplain to the youth is to have them understand how to give an order and how to take an order. And when you're looking in a society where there's a lot of bullying going on outside in the school, and lots of messages happening we've all heard the terrible stories about messages coming across that are on tweeted or on Facebook or on computers that are picking on children. You have to be able to understand what it's to receive that kind of abuse. And I try to remind our cadets that as they are given positions of authority, they were at one time not in that position, so they know what it feels like to be seen as a lesser as they grow to greater powers of command. And hopefully, and I really do think that the bullying issue is being addressed seriously by schools and by the youth themselves, and they are starting to realize, a little bit of teasing that started off teasing can escalate, and you get back to, well, what does it feel like to be in that position? What does it feel like to be teased? And try to address some of those things.
3 of our 4 children went through the Air Cadet program, not here, but in Cambridge. And it was a marvelous program for helping the young people have some structure in their lives and learning to be organized and to be responsible. And I think that a lot of young people are looking for that kind of guidance and that sort of mentoring. Mm-hmm. And so that's one reason too that why we really are committed to the Air Cadet program. So Rob is chaplain for the one in Rockland.
Well, for sure that not only children, but adults, anybody, children of all ages, you need a success, you need a sense of self-worth, and you need to know something that you're good at, and then to be able to be engaged in that, hopefully, in that area. But then also you need a source of strength when everything seems to be going wrong, because in life that's the way things happen, success and failure and success and failure. And very often people don't know where to turn when things go badly. So there's a lot of load on your shoulder there.
No, wow.
Well, I know
life is busy. I don't.
Yeah. I know you're humble and you're wise, but still, for those of us who go home at the end of the day and pour a glass of wine and turn on the news and, let's watch someone else's problems because I can't deal with mine, you too often don't get to do that. So I guess there's the obvious answer, but there's probably a less obvious answer because there's always more to it than meets the eyes. But where do you get the strength, the conviction to do this?
Well, first of all, it's our calling. There's no doubt. I mean, Hillary and I would not be doing this work if we did not believe that we're supported by the Holy Spirit and by God. So no matter what the challenge is, there's the prayer that we're doing the right thing for the right cause, for the right direction. has always been my minister. And that's a good thing for me to realize that there isn't anything that can come into my life that we can't share and that I can't feel that support with. Being in team ministry for so many years, it's a job that you wouldn't want to do if you weren't able to share it with somebody else. So much of what we do, of course, is confidential, and it's a lot easier when both of us are involved in the same matter so that we can lean on each other.
I think one of the biggest challenges for me is the guilt of knowing the things that don't get done, right? And realizing that we're just human, that we can't attempt to manage to do everything to fill all the needs that we see. And then even when we do try, we're not perfect. We're human. We fail, and the sense that, okay, we're not in this alone. God's with us. We've got people, our faith community around us to support us, and we've got the forgiveness, God's forgiveness when we do fail. So I think that's a really important aspect of being able to say, okay, I made a mistake, I'm forgiven, or I can't do it, or I'm forgiven for that inability, and there are others to help out. And it's continually a struggle. There's always...
I can't do it all. That doesn't mean I'm defective. It means it's time to ask for help.
Mm-hmm, that's right. And that's continually a struggle, because there's always more, and you think there's always more visits that need to be done, or somebody else that could use some help, or something more, that another idea that you think, oh, if we had the time to do that, it would be so much of an advantage, but we can't. The other thing is, away from the faith side of it, is that we do take time for ourselves. When the children were at home, they're all in their 20s now, but when they were at home, we'd take the month of July off and we'd go camping, spend a lot of time in Algonquin Park, and away from the phones and away from others, and just a chance to have some downtime. And now we have our sailboat that we keep in Rockland, in the marina there, and we can go out in the water and just...
And the dogs.
And the
Don't
dogs.
forget the dogs.
I was going to say the dogs.
Okay.
I was.
Forget what I said. Keep going. They're a great source of comfort.
They
But
are.
the other part, I think, really is prayer. We have a long prayer every night, and I pray for the concerns of the parishioners. I can turn that over to God at the end of the night and get a good night's sleep. Mm-hmm. And you have to be able to do that, because you can't carry all that concern for everybody else and not have a way to direct it. So able to direct it by having my nightly prayer and saying that's this day's ministry, and tomorrow's day's ministry will be filled again, but I can turn it over.
That little prayer of, and now I lay me down to sleep, is so much more meaningful than so many children realize, perhaps even more than so many parents realize. Do you know of other couples who are doing the same thing as you?
In the United Church, there's been a tradition of women in ministry, so it's not that surprising within the United Church. Our first woman ordained was probably back in the 1930s. So in terms of seeing women in ministry, they're leaders in this denomination for many years. As we've gone along and found clergy couples is not unusual, but to have couples that work together is more unusual.
So in the Ottawa area, in particular in the United Church, there are quite a large number of clergy couples. Mm-hmm. I can think of very few that work together, as we are not officially working together anymore, but we did for a lot of years.
Here. But yeah. I can't think of any that really did work together. Many had their ministries in separate parishes. Mm-hmm. But I would say it's rare for a couple to actually work together.
And our mindset, even though we officially have two different jobs, because of my voluntary associateship here and because of the way we are in our relationship, we team on everything. So much as I team with Rob and we discuss stuff here at the church and we work together on things, Rob's always in the background and sometimes in the foreground helping with my ministry. So when I took a group of young people to Haida Gwaii on an exchange with Haida First Nation youth a year and a half ago, Rob was one of the chaperones that came with me.
And as I developed my mission program for Dominican, Hillary's one of the team members coming. So,
So we're still teaming even though it's not official, the teaming relationship.
It's very inspiring. And at some level, I can see how it would make a relationship stronger, because you don't even have time to be petty about anything. You're involved in serious things all the time.
there are always
and you're helping each
disagreements
other.
about things, as any couple will, but that's life. And at the end of the day, of course, we love each other more than any argument could ever be. And at the end of the day, we are both fully called into what we do.
I think too, we're both ordained. We're both, we don't have to feel threatened by each other. We're not in competition with each other. We see our life as a team, be it parenting or church work or sailing the sailboat, or everything is teaming. And right from day one, we've had a lot of fun together, and we've laughed a lot together, and we both can laugh at ourselves. And so I think that this
You
is
more
just...
so at me than I at you.
Catalin can understand that. So I think that because we have fun, whether it's work or play, that's the key.
Well, I have to say that it's fascinating to to learn about other ways of doing things, to see examples of other ways of doing things that work, and to realize that there are people who are so committed, and congregations that are so committed to making things happen, that it's almost easy, because so often it feels like you're trying to pull a congregation together or a community together, and it's difficult. It shouldn't be so difficult. It should be a common understanding of the mission. And I suppose when you've got two leaders like you, because you are leaders in every sense of the word, two leaders like you, then it makes everybody else step up to the plate.
I think
Step
our
up to the
attitude
plate.
has been
It's
with the
inspiration.
congregation too, to let's have fun together.
Yeah.
And so as we do our best to follow God's leading. And so I think that's been a mark of congregation, first where we were in Cambridge and here, and my first charge, No Death in Elginburg, our first charge, that we've had fun with our congregations and continue to. So I think that's been a big key.
You had mentioned that when you have events, that you have the congregation and then the wider community that become involved. So I suppose you open your arms to other than United
Well, one
Church
of the things that we want to be here in the community is to be known for our hospitality and for our citizenship and good neighborly attitude. So looking at a mission project going down to the Dominican, we decided to make that a community project rather than St. Andrew's project, and came under the banner of Cumberland Cares, inspired by this congregation, and certainly all the donations, receipts comes back through a non-charitable, a non-profit charitable organization like this congregation. But the work of it was to invite people of the community to come and join us. So 18 of us are going down to the Dominican Republic to do work with the poor, many of them Haitian, in the Dominican. And of those 18, 10 are from the congregation, 8 from the community. They don't have any significant tie to St. Andrew's. They've become a good friend of ourselves and have supported our mission cause. Some may not have any church connection at all, and that wasn't the criterion to it. The criterion was to do good work. So this congregation has always impressed me in that they're very open-minded around being a neighbor first. I don't think anybody would ever feel unwelcome coming here. Of late, we've had a a Muslim family join us in worship and attend on a regular basis. And I'm very pleased to know that our doors are able to be open for anybody from any background to come in and to share with us. We do have a high percentage of parishioners that are former Roman Catholics that do worship with us. And in Cumberland, in the last 10 years, Muslim community had purchased the former school, public school that was in Cumberland, and have started their own faith community, AMJ. And
AMJ?
Yes, it's
Do you know what that stands
it's a
for?
Pakistani Muslim community, and their imam lives in Cumberland, and their community draws the greater area of Ottawa. They draw from the eastern part of the city to Cumberland. They have just recently, in the last month, opened a second mosque in Canada. So there are two mosques affiliated with their congregations in Ottawa. We've, for the last, before we came, so I would say the last 7 or 8 years, have been on good working relationships with the Muslim community. We share our Remembrance Day services together, and we invite their imam to be here in our worship service, lead us in prayers, and our last Remembrance Day service was able to be with us and sing his prayer. Prayers for world peace and understanding. And I think this is a wonderful community that has opened its doors to a different kind of understanding of faith, not being threatened, but to realize that there is a supreme being for all of us.
That is so encouraging to hear that. It does boggle the mind sometimes that there have to be so many different churches when actually there's one God.
Well, there's a lot of commonality within our faith backgrounds for both the Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and biblically we know that our roots go back to Abraham, the father of all three. So there's commonality that we need to focus on rather than the differences. For the Muslim community, Jesus is mentioned in their Quran. He's a prophet. He's not the Messiah as that he is seen in the Christian tradition. But Mary and Jesus are spoken in the Quran. In fact, the Imam had laughingly said to me that Jesus is mentioned more than Muhammad is. It's not to be a threat in terms of how we can be neighbors. Obviously, I'm a Christian minister, and I do believe that Jesus was Son of God. That's a position that I can hold easily in conversation with respect with my Muslim counterparts, and we've had a good working relationship together.
We can agree to disagree on issues of faith. Obviously, our faith is different, but there are commonalities, and we do share a lot. And one thing that binds us together in these unsettled times is that mosque and the people who are part of that faith community are as concerned for world peace as we are, and we can all pray together for world peace. And I think that's something that people forget, that too often, that we're in this together in our prayers for peace.
Well, certainly, if you leave it to the media, then it's always the differences that are going to be put to the forefront. But when you talk to the people, then it's the commonalities that they're looking for, because that's how we survive. And luckily, they are there, as you said, everywhere, back from Abraham to what's in the writings and the scriptures, the message of peace and love and protecting and welcoming. Big message. I don't think most people even knew that there was a Muslim community here in Cumberland. And I think that is excellent news. That is excellent news. How else do we get to know, as you said, when you go on your trips, how do you get to know other than to meet face to face?
Our relationship with the mosque has been a good one, that we have had the ladies from their congregation in our building in a fundraising effort, a bake sale. And we've had the Anglican Church, the Roman Catholics, and United and Muslim community women gather here as a fundraiser for all their own causes, for their own congregations, but to be joined together. And that's a step in the right direction towards building community. It doesn't mean that we all have to agree with one another on the fine line, but we do have to have a sense of the bigger picture.
Well, it's just like we couldn't all even hope to agree on which is the best language in the world, because there is no such thing. You couldn't agree on which is the best country in the world or the most beautiful, because they all are at some level. So it's wise to know that there are supposed to be differences and that we can adapt to them. You've learned things, but obviously you came to your ministry with an innate wisdom, knowledge. You were probably born with it, some would believe, I do believe. You have a calling to become a priest, a minister of the United Church. When I graduated from university, when I look back, I know that what I learned there was nothing but a piece of paper, because what I learned there had nothing to do with what I needed to learn later on in order to function. That's a pretty radical statement, but what you went through, did it prepare you for what you've had to face since then? What you went through to become a minister?
Certainly, the foundation was there. As you said, we grew up with our faith, and that's not true of everyone, but both Robert and I came from Christian homes where faith was a strong part of our home life. My father, in fact, was a minister. And my undergraduate degree is in psychology, which is
very useful.
A big help in a lot of the relationships in which I deal as a minister. The United Church requires that we have an undergraduate degree in some discipline. It doesn't have to be any particular discipline. And then a Master's of Theology, a 3 years master's degree of theology, as well as a placement, a field placement, an internship. And there are many things that we study, as in any university course, that we really don't end up using a whole lot. But there are other things that have been very helpful and very practical. And of course, the internship is where it all comes together, right? The academic. And there are probably things that we learn that we don't even think about the way they apply, but they do. So, but that's the usual requirement for United Church ministry is an undergraduate degree, then a Master's of Theology, along with an internship, and then you're placed in a congregation.
Seems to me like in the modern day that comparative religions would be one of the more useful subjects
yes.
that you might get.
Absolutely. And for Hillary, who came into ministry pretty much right from university, from your BA into your...
I was very young when I was ordained.
Hillary was young, ordained. I had years of experience in radio, television, journalism, public relations, and marketing. That was a whole different goal for me at that time. But the call to ministry was clear to me, so I then quit my job, spent 5 years to get my education in university, because I only had community college up to that point. And yet, when I look back, all the work that I did around communications was extremely beneficial to the work that I do now. So it was a blending of past experiences and as well as my new learnings as a minister in being trained in ministry and theology that came together.
So alongside the academic training, the church has different levels of interviewing and assessing suitability for ministry. So there's psychological testing, there are various interviews that each person has to go through, right from the beginning where you're exploring with a group of people, helping you to explore your journey and to explore whether or not this is in fact how God wants us to live out our call. Because I believe everyone has a calling. It's whether it's not lived out as ordained ministry. And then in the United Church, there are different streams of ministry. We both felt called to ordained ministry, which means that in the general population, people recognize that usually as with the title reverend or pastor. That's how we're designated, but it really is a formal term that's used for saying that the church has recognized, in particular for us, the United Church of Canada has recognized that call for a particular ministry for word and sacrament and pastoral care.
Yeah, word, sacrament, and pastoral care are the crux to it all. So it is the preaching, it is the sacraments of communion and baptism, as well as pastoral care, visiting people in need and counseling. So that is the crux of it, but beyond that becomes the other things that you engage people in around mission work and around causes.
I want to thank you so much for letting us into your lives.
Thank you.
For letting us in a little bit into your congregation's life, and for inspiring, hopefully, more than one viewer. I'm certainly inspired. Not that that means that I'm going to go and get myself ordained, because that's not my calling. And I think it's important for all of us to realize what our little role in the world is. But it's a pleasure knowing you. It's a delight knowing you.
Well, thank you for this.
And it's been a total delight doing this interview.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you too very much, and Godspeed.
God bless you.
And for all of you who've been watching this, I hope you've totally enjoyed this. Perhaps it's something that you're quite familiar with. Perhaps it's something that you're not familiar with. But if it's something you're not familiar with, then it's bound to be something that inspires you. We have Rob and Hillary you're bound to bump into when you're around Clarence Rockland, or who knows, the way the world works, somewhere at the other end of the world, you're going to step out of a cafe and there are going to be Rob and Hillary with a group of young people. Because the world is getting smaller and smaller. And on that note, I wish you all an absolutely wonderful week. This is Cats About Town, and see you next week.